I want to talk about different kinds of man's laws. Now, if you're a little bit of a conspiracy theorist, you will have heard um, that quite often courts are using what's known as admiralty or maritime law, and there's all kinds of information about that on the internet. I'm not going to go into it, but I'm just was reviewing an article like this, and something didn't really go well with me. They were giving examples of where people are giving consent to do things. And one of the things was a patriotic American who joined the army because he was very patriotic and he wanted to defend his country. And the scenario was Iraq under George Bush's administration. And as you may or may not remember, George Bush's administration said the reason we're going to invade Iraq is because they've got weapons of mass destruction. So, in this example, this patriotic American joined the American Army, fought overseas, and then later on, as many people are aware, the government admitted that there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. And in this particular example, the soldier, after learning this, wanted to get out of the army. And this one article said, well, you gave your consent to become an American soldier and you can't get out of the army. And all kinds of alarm bells were going off here with me because clearly this person who enlisted in the army did it because he was told that that America was what? He was lied to. He was lied to by the Bush administration. So that was false pretenses. And I know, George Bush didn't go up to this guy's front door, knock on it, and say, "I need you in the army," but used the what they call the bully pulpit of the president. In other words, the president and his administration told the American public through the news media that this was what the truth was. And it was a bald-faced lie. So I call it false pretenses. And I would say that under my kind of law, this particular soldier, if he wanted out, he should be allowed to leave the army because he was lied to, and that's what led him to joining the army, to go and protect his country from Iraq. So it seems like, once again, even the information that is educational on the internet is not correct. Why do I say it's not correct? Because Spirit tells me that it's incorrect. Because I get all kinds of noises when I'm reading this, and I get the information in my head that says, this is not right. And it's like I get, different electronic things in the house start making bing, bing, bing noises at this time. So it's a sign. It's not a poltergeist. It's Spirit saying, pay attention. There is something here you need to pay attention to. And I get this feeling, in my body that something's not right. So what does it mean? It means you have to start trusting your intuition and listening for clues, listening for the voice of Spirit. And, don't expect it to be, oh, it's me, God, and, I want you to, notice something about this. No, it comes by unusual noises or things, it's like if a bird flies into your window, that's something you notice. Pay attention if something odd like that happens. It doesn't happen every day. Something like a bird flies into your window, it means pay attention to what else is going on at the time right now. You have to be clued into these things. Are you ever going to hear the voice of God? I don't know. Because essentially, you are God. It's not sacrilegious. And if someone tells you it's sacrilegious to say you are God, then they're trying to control you. Why is that? Well, think of yourself as an extension of the God. Because God created you, so there's no separation between you and God. You are the created, and it is the creator. It's always the creator, and you're always the created. This is also a lie. Why is it a lie? Because you were never separated from that which created you. And if someone tells you that you were separated and you're always going to be separated, they're lying to you because they want to manipulate you. And they probably have their hand out and they said, I'm a priest and I'm connected to God, or I've got some ceremonies I can do. And if you pay me some money or you tithe 10% of your salary to me, well, I'll talk to God on your behalf. What about Jesus? Some people say Jesus is the only one that can talk to God on your behalf. These are all lies. These are all lies because people who are in the business of being priests, ministers, pastors, I forget what you call these people in Islam, or a rabbi in if you're Jewish, they're in business because everyone on the planet is in business for me. I need Mookie money. So anyway, as far as this goes, what really is law that you're bound to? Well, if you're in a country, you're pretty much bound by the country's laws. Why? Because they've got large police forces of different types and jails and penitentiaries to put you in if you don't follow their laws. So they have physical powers over you. And some people belong to some of these personal sovereignty movements and say, well, your law doesn't have jurisdiction over me. Well, you're quite likely to end up in jail because they have got force. And they can certainly get a big team of police officers, arrest you, and throw you in jail. Is it legal? According to the country's laws, yes. Is it legal according to any other kind of laws? This is interesting. Anyone would say, you got to follow your country's laws. And if the country has international laws that they have signed on to, you got to follow these too. But we have an example exactly of the situation going on now in British Columbia, Canada. Because we've got an indigenous tribe who has got two sets of leaders. They have got what is known as elected chiefs and hereditary chiefs. And the elected chiefs were set up by the Canadian government under the Indian Act of, might be 1870, very old act, but it's still in force. And the government considers the elected chiefs to be the official representatives of the tribe. But there's plenty of people that are saying this was, back at the time, it was basically the British Empire that was controlling Canada under the British North American Act. This is all old law, but it's history. And they said somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was the original law or some amendments to the law, but you have to have elected chiefs. So we have got a corporation that wants to put a pipeline through British Columbia, and they wanted to get permission from the tribe to do it, so they went to the government-approved chiefs, the elected chiefs. But the hereditary chiefs don't approve. And the hereditary chiefs, we're told, were the official tribal chiefs long before the British Empire came to North America. But the corporation has got to follow Canadian law, and the Canadian law says elected chiefs. And now there's a huge protests and blockades all over Canada in support of the hereditary chiefs. So if you're the corporation, the pipeline corporation, what the hell are you supposed to do? You have to follow the Canadian law, which says elected chiefs, which you did, and you got their approval. But you've got this other group, which is not really recognized. I can't say for sure, because Canadian courts have accepted presentations from Indigenous peoples. And, what are the courts going to allow as being representatives of the Indigenous peoples? It seems to be up to the courts to decide. This to me is wrong. It's wrong because it is a European, British colonial government that was set up in Canada that is deciding. And to me, it seems wrong because quite often people of European extraction are called by Indigenous people white settlers. I don't like the term. It's a racist term. It's as bad as the N-word because it is very demeaning. And yet it's being used, and the reason it's being used is because the white-bodied humans that are in Canada that came from European countries, their ancestry in North America doesn't go back as far as the Indigenous, obviously. But people with this color skin, Europeans, were the ones that set up the Constitution of Canada. Was it all of the white humans? No, it was not. It was people from Great Britain who were in the Great British government. And if you think back to the American Revolution, King George was the king, and he had a lot more power vested in himself in those days than Queen Elizabeth II, the current monarch, has. And they called him Mad King George. They said he was pretty much off his nut, but he was still the king. How does that mean? It means that it was a small group of the aristocracy primarily who were running the government of Britain at that time and who set up the Canadian government. So it wasn't the average Joe, in modern day. It wasn't the plumber and the electrician. It wasn't the doctor. Was it the lawyers? Well, the lawyers had to become well-versed in all these different kinds of laws. And primarily, even today, in Canada, it's not the politicians who draft up the laws. It is lawyers who work for the Department of Justice of Canada, for example. So we really have a very elite group who set up the Canadian government and the way it functions, and who told the Indigenous people, this is the way it's going to be. Why? Well, because we've got, guns, artillery, naval ships. And this was basically the history of North America. The original story was, around Thanksgiving that there was a peaceful gathering of Indigenous and Europeans, and they had a lovely Thanksgiving supper. But there were all kinds of fights that went on between the European powers and the Indigenous people, and in many cases, the Indigenous people allied with European powers against other European powers and against other Indigenous tribes, according to the history that we're taught. Well, you're going to have to go with that because I don't have a time machine. Time machines are a whole different talk. But, based upon the best available information that we have today, this is the way it was. So getting back to British Columbia, it's quite a schmozzle, because the Canadian government claimed all of what if you look at on the map as what is marked Canada, the Canadian government claimed all of it, and then was making side deals with the Indigenous people. And some of the Indigenous people apparently didn't sign on to some of these agreements. So some people say there's what's known as unceded territory. In other words, the Europeans claimed it and, for all intents and purposes, protect it with the Canadian Army, even the Canadian Air Force. But the Indigenous people say, I know you're doing all this, but we never said we wanted to be party to any agreements with you, Government of Canada. What is going to happen now? Well, it's a shit show. What should happen according to ethics and morality rather than Canadian law? Well, which ethics and which morality do you want to use? There's not just a one-size-fits-all when it comes to this. And apparently, according to news sources, some of the Indigenous peoples like the idea of this pipeline because it's going to create jobs for them and streams of income. While other Indigenous people say, I don't like this pipeline because this is sacred land for one reason or another, and I'm not in on it. So we don't seem to see a full agreement among the Indigenous people, although that's what the news reports, and everyone knows that the news reporters cannot be trusted. Most of the time I say Donald Trump says it's fake news. I say they're blatant liars because they are corporate owned, and corporations have an agenda called I need more people to sign on to buy advertising on my channel. And I'm also owned by rich people who own lots of corporations. So they're very highly biased. So how do we get real good news? Well, the good news is I don't agree. I don't agree to be governed by countries just because I happen to be born into a country, because I didn't know what the hell was going on. I grew up in the country and they educated me with their curriculum, not my curriculum that I chose. Like in a Montessori school, a child chooses what they want to learn and when they want to learn it. No, these are indoctrination schools of Canada. Various other countries do the same thing. And once you're indoctrinated into the ways that the government curriculum tells you, you're brainwashed. And, you have to be very careful when you're talking to other people, because quite often your brainwashing makes you a tool of whoever brainwashed you. On the other hand, if you're wise to this, you also have to be wise to even people, such as the Indigenous, have an agenda as well. Just because they... What? Well, where are their... I don't have a word. It's just that I don't trust anyone on this planet. I'm an X-Files kind of guy. Trust no one. Because pretty much everyone on the planet, regardless of the color of their outside skin, inside, you can't see what their core beliefs are. It takes quite a while to figure out a person, because people are very good at putting on a front. Basically putting on a suit that says, I'm this or that. And underneath it, what do they really believe? What do they really stand for? It's very hard to get to that. So no, I don't trust anyone, regardless of how good their story is, because I'm pretty much of the opinion that humans and their egos are basically very self-centered, and they're looking after themselves, and they're not looking after humans as a collective. Which people are looking after humans as a collective? People who are doing a lot of what they say inner work, a lot of meditation, a lot of studying a lot of different things: spiritual traditions, psychology, philosophy, history, some people mathematics, astronomy, some people are studying parapsychology. All kinds of different subjects are relevant, because the biggest problems with humans is I can tell you a lie if I'm a really good liar. I mean, advertising is based upon lies, delivering a lie. They hire a professional actor to deliver, this is the message of our product, because we want people to buy it. Everything. So, if you do the inner work and you do a lot of meditation, what happens? You have to do a lot of what's known as letting go of your ego. And I've talked about this on other videos, how to let go of your ego. And all the time, you're never really sure, have I let go of 100% of my ego? Is there a residual ego here that's acting through me? So one has to be continually working. You can't just say, "Oh, I worked on my, my inner self, 10 years ago, so I'm good now." Mm-mm. Because you're still immersed in a planet full of egoic people and egoic institutions. So maybe thought you were pretty good 10 years ago, but you stopped doing all this inner work. And now, well, maybe you were coasting for a while, but you've forgotten about all your lessons, and you've readopted the ways of the world rather than the spirit. So you have to always be checking in. What does checking in mean? It means where, the things I'm saying, the things I'm thinking about, where is this coming from? Is this my stuff? Is this the stuff that, where's the stuff coming from? Is this meeting my personal ethics, or the ethics that I was indoctrinated into by the Canadian school system? And even if it's my stuff, maybe it's still not 100% right. Why? Well, it's a vast world, and situations are never totally the same. And that's what, Western law is based upon. It's like, it's called stare decisis. In other words, previous courts have ruled on an issue similar to this, and this is what they said. And if you're a junior court to, the Supreme Court that ruled on this, you have to follow the Supreme Court. In other words, there's a hierarchy of courts. And the higher the court is, everything that's lower on the hierarchy has to follow stare decisis, what was decided by the highest courts. So, if a judge says, well, this was decided by the Supreme Court and his judgment, you're depending upon a judge, and they're human, and they can make mistakes, or they can not see that there is a significant difference between what the Supreme Court ruled and what is before this particular judge at a particular time. So that's why you have like appeal courts and, revisiting old laws. So law is never fixed. It's always moving, but you can definitely get steamrolled by it if you're not aware of these things. In an ideal world, what would we have? I don't know. We don't live in an ideal world, and I don't see us getting to an ideal world anytime soon. So the best thing you can do is put your thinking cap on and really become well-educated and well aware of all the pitfalls, because there's way more pitfalls on this planet than there are blessings, because the planet is ruled by egoic people with hidden agendas. And today is the 20th of February, 2020. That's the way I see it. I'm Harry Weaver, your narrator.